Hey everyone, welcome back to the next episode of My Stuff. And we're looking at two very important books. These books are, they're written by a bunch of different people, and as you can tell, this one is, it's how to animate as if you were working for Disney. This is Disney's Manual of Animation. And I bought this when I started studying animation, and it's really, really good. It explains everything you'd ever want to know about how not just Disney animation, but animation in general. It's how to make things beautiful and flowing and fluid, and how to make things it's very technically accurate. And this one over here, the Animator Survival Guide. This was actually written by a guy from the Warner Brothers studio. So we have Disney style animation, we have Warner Brothers style animation, and they're both from like the classical high period of each of the two studios. And when I say the classical high period, I'm talking about, like, as you can see, we've got Pinocchio, and it's got, I'm gonna try, yeah, Snow White, and all of this other stuff, and yeah, see what I mean? It actually goes through how to add. Let me see if I can find. Goes through what are referred to as the principles of animation. Here we go. That's what I was talking about. The principles of animation. And this is something that is standard. Doesn't matter if you're doing like high quality, like very technical Disney stuff, or like cartooning, like what you'd see on like television or movies. Even now, in the realm of 3D animation, these 12 principles are very important. It's talking about squash and stretch. As you can see, things squash down and then they stretch out, and which leads us into what's called anticipation, where it's like you're leading into the action. It's like if I'm going to move my hand, I go like this and then move. It's anticipate, and then the staging. It's part of anticipation, where you set up what it is that you're going to be doing. So the next two, straight ahead action and pose to pose, are two different styles of animation. Hold on a second. There we go, as I was saying. Straight ahead is where you start with an initial picture, and then you animate each individual frame going from that point forward. And pose to pose is where you'll have keyframes, like you'll have different, as you see here along the bottom, keyframes, and then you would animate the pieces in between. And then we have follow through and overlapping action. Again, that's where it leads off of the previous three, of the first three, where you have you're lining up your action, you're setting up your action, and then you follow through and overlapping, or where you follow through with the action you just set up, and you overlap it with the action of the next action. I know it doesn't sound like it makes a whole lot of sense, but it does. Slow in and slow out is another. It's a very it has to do with the technical aspect of setting up your frames, where the beginning half of your action you have a lot of frames, and then you and then at the end of the action you have a lot of frames, and in between you don't have very many. I know this doesn't without actually setting up, without actually doing this, I know it's kind of hard to convey a visual medium in words and text, but this is the way it works. Arcs, things move in an arc. It has to do with the way things, like the rounded movement of things. Like as you see my hand, it moves. The tip of my fingers move in an arc. They don't move side to side unless the lower part of my arm is moving in an arc. Secondary action, it's like as you see the tips of my fingers, they move a bit, and it actually makes it look like it's moving faster than it is. The time it takes to do the action that you're animating, exaggerating. You have to exaggerate it to get it across what it is that you're trying to do. solid drawing. You have to be able to draw something that actually looks like what it is that you're wanting to do. Like you can see Mickey and Minnie, early versions of Mickey and Minnie. It looks like a vaguely mouse-like enough, which leads us to appeal. It has to look good. If it were like two actual real mice-looking mice, it wouldn't look as funny. But since they're caricatured, they have an appeal. Yeah, here we go. 12. Here we go. The flour sacks. This is something I actually had to do when I was studying. The squash, stretch, twist, all the different ways. And it's all covered, and all of that stuff is, like I said, it's covered in this, and it's using Disney characters, and this book is out of print as far as I know. However, this book is still in print, and you can still go out and buy it, and it covers all of the information here with, and I think it's actually it gets things it gets things across a little more, see if I can find a little more clearly. Of course, it starts off with the history of animation and how it was started and how it works. And yet, yes, you have to be able to draw to make cartoons. It's very important. Because if you can't draw, you're not going to be doing anything useful. Alright, here we go. This is what I was talking about, slow in and slow out. This is a much better. Yeah, like I said, this one has a much better explanation than the Disney one. The Disney one relies on you having someone there to explain, to impart the knowledge, whereas this one, you go by it, you read through it, you're animating. It's one of the things I kind of liked about this one over the Disney book. But the Disney book is one of those where it is a collector's item, and I bought it off of eBay. See if I can find something else, something interesting, more technical. Yeah, like I said, this one is whereas the other one would show you like clips from Disney drawing. This one he actually did. Now here we go. Here's squash, stretch. As you can see, it's a lot more. This one goes into a lot more detail, and it goes through a lot more Warner Brothers always did a lot more exaggeration, whereas Disney was always more on the flow of things, and it shows with the way things are set up. Disney was always more concerned with the drawing and the flow of the animation, whereas Warner Brothers was always more concerned with the exaggeration and the action, which actually goes into more into the style. And I'm talking about like the old 2D animation, the old drawn. This Disney animation was done on what is referred to as 12 frames a second. Like all the classic Disney movies like Pinocchio and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, all of those are animated at 12 frames a second. That means for every second you're seeing 12 drawings. Whereas Warner Brothers, they really cracked the whip on their guys. They did it at, I think it was like 20. They did it at double the rate. They did 24 because no, it wasn't 24. They did actually full on 30 frames a second because they were animating for the camera equipment and the film speed, the stock of the film speed that was used by the Warner Brothers Corporation, which ran at 30 frames a second, which said that if you are going to, if you were going to be animating for Warner Brothers, you were going to be working at the same rate that the film was projected at, which was 30 frames a second. Since Disney did everything in-house, they didn't have to worry about that. 12 frames a second at 30 frames a second meant that things didn't quite line up, but because they were printing their own film, it didn't matter. But you don't have to worry about that now, because now everything's handled with computers where you draw and set everything up. I was learning to do animation in the transition era, the transition away from traditional hand-drawn 2D towards the current generation of computer animated stuff. And I wanted to do computer animation, but it wasn't as developed. So I learned how to do 2D, and I got an amazing appreciation for this. And I wish this stuff was still done this way, but it's not. They don't draw by hand anymore. You may say, it's like, well, if they don't draw by hand, what do they draw with? They draw with tablets, and like this thing, well, not this thing. This is another piece of old technology. This is a Wacom tablet. They have full-on screens now. This is actually a fairly early version of touch technology. You had a pen, and you would draw. And occasionally I still do use this thing. It's actually, you can see it's actually plugged into my computer now. I just hardly ever use it because I don't draw on my computer, because it doesn't feel like drawing on paper. Because drawing on this, it's smooth. It's too smooth. I don't get the roughness of paper, which I learned that I like. Which is why when we started covering early Flash animation, which is now what everything is done now. If you're seeing a cartoon on television, it doesn't matter what it is or what it's called or where it's from. It doesn't matter if it's Japanese anime. It doesn't matter if it's Saturday morning cartoons. It doesn't matter where in the world it comes from. Everyone is using Flash. Even even if there is another program out there called Toon Boom, which was invented at the same time as Flash was being ported over to become an animation tool, as opposed to a thing to put blinking, flashing lights on and ads on a website back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So Flash transitioned to an animation tool, which it is today. But it's still, if you're going to be working in Flash, you gotta know code, because it still has its code basis as a coding language, an offshoot of all of the internet code. It still has that built into the back end. Whereas something like Toon Boom, which I was never taught on, which apparently is an industry standard, so thank you very much, Art Institute, for not teaching me what is actually an industry standard, which I paid you for. This is another rant for another time. But I'm just going to cut it off here saying, if you think you need to go to college to learn something, go buy a book. You'll save a lot of money and a lot of time. And you might actually, depending upon what it is you learn, might not have to pay thousands of dollars for something exceedingly pointless. But anyway, what was I talking? I was talking about animation. So, yes, my book's on animation. I have some fairly strong views on that. I wish 2D animation was still being done by hand, but it's not. It's all done with like Flash and Toon Boom and vector drawing programs. Occasionally, some studios still do stuff by hand, but very few do. Most everything is churned out at a factory rate, especially the stuff that you see on TV. That, like, again, as I said, it doesn't matter what country it comes from. It doesn't matter the stuff that you see on Cartoon Network. The storyboards are made here in America. The story is written here in America. But everything, it doesn't matter if it's a cartoon from Japan or a cartoon from the United States, it's all done in Korea, because in Korea they pay animators by the page that they draw, and it's cents on the dollar. So you'll have like 20 or 30 animators living in a hovel in Korea, making barely enough to afford a cup of rice a day, and these poor people are worked half to death. So remember that next time you see a cartoon you like. It's made by Korean slaves. So with that, I'm done, and I will see you guys next time.